The morning sun cast long shadows across the metal corridors of the Galactic Military Academy as Lisa Harper walked to her combat training session. Her boots echoed against the floor while alien cadets towered over her on all sides. The Academy. Set on Titan 7, a moon where beings from dozens of worlds learned to fight together for peace across the galaxy, Lisa stood barely 5 feet tall among creatures that reached 8 or 9 feet in height. The Drachner had thick scales and claws that could tear through steel. The Corvan warriors possessed natural armor and strength that could crush rocks with their bare hands. The insectoid hivers moved with lightning speed and had razor-sharp limbs. Next to them, Lisa looked like a child carrying equipment too heavy for her small frame. Commander Thex, a massive Drachner with scarred green scales, ran the combat training program. His yellow eyes held nothing but contempt when they fell upon the human cadets. He believed humans were weak creatures who belonged in supply rooms and medical bays, not on battlefields. Every day he made this opinion clear to anyone within hearing distance. Humans, he would growl through his fanged mouth, are soft meat that breaks too easily for real warfare. The training hall buzzed with activity as different species practiced their combat forms. Brutus, a Corvan warrior with dark red skin and bone spikes protruding from his shoulders, dominated the sparring ring. He stood nearly 8 feet tall and weighed twice as much as any 3 humans combined. His natural armor plates reflected the training lights as he threw practice opponents across the room with casual ease. Lisa watched from the sidelines where Commander Thex had placed all the human cadets. They were assigned to observe and learn about alien fighting techniques so they could better support the real warriors in future missions. The message was clear: humans were not meant to fight but to serve those who could. During break time, Lisa overheard conversations between alien cadets about their homeworlds and battles their species had won. The Drachner spoke of conquering planets through pure strength. The Corvan told stories of warriors who could fight for days without rest. The Hivers described swarm tactics that overwhelmed enemies through speed and numbers. When humans tried to share their own military history, the alien cadets laughed or simply walked away. They saw no value in learning about wars fought by creatures they considered barely stronger than children. Earth's conflicts seemed primitive compared to battles involving energy weapons and soldiers who could tear through starship hulls with their claws. Lisa spent her evenings in the Academy's archives, reading about military tactics and strategies from across the galaxy. She studied how different species fought and what made them effective in combat. The more she learned, the more she noticed patterns that others seemed to miss. Many alien species relied heavily on their natural advantages, but showed little adaptation. When those advantages were removed, the human cadets lived in smaller quarters than their alien counterparts, ate different food, and trained with lighter equipment. Everything about their treatment reinforced the idea that they were lesser beings who had been allowed into the Academy as an act of charity rather than because they had earned their place. Late at night, when the main training areas were empty, Lisa would sneak out to practice. She found abandoned sections of the Academy where old equipment gathered dust. Here she could work on techniques without being mocked or told to stop interfering with real training. Lisa studied human anatomy and physiology, comparing it to the alien species around her. She learned that humans had better endurance than most species and could function effectively in a wider range of environments. Human hands were more precise than claws, and human minds seemed better at finding solutions to complex problems. But these advantages meant nothing in a culture that valued size, strength, and natural weapons above all else. The galaxy's military doctrine was built around the idea that bigger and stronger always won. Tactics and strategy were secondary to raw physical power. One evening, Lisa discovered old training records in the Academy's database. She found footage of early battles between different species before the current alliance was formed. What surprised her was how often the larger, stronger species had lost to smaller ones who used better tactics or exploited weaknesses their enemies had never considered. These victories had been forgotten or dismissed as lucky accidents. The current military leadership preferred to focus on examples where strength had triumphed over cunning. They taught cadets that overwhelming force was the key to victory in any conflict. Lisa began to see that the galaxy's military had become complacent. Thousands of years of peace had made them forget the importance of adaptability and innovation. They relied on established patterns and traditional approaches that had worked in the past. The human cadets around Lisa were starting to lose hope. Daily humiliation and constant reminders of their supposed weakness were taking their toll. Some talked about requesting transfers to support roles, where they would not have to endure the combat training program. Lisa refused to give up. She knew that humans had survived and thrived on Earth through intelligence and determination, not through superior physical strength. Earth's history was filled with examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through better planning and tactics. As weeks passed, Lisa noticed that alien cadets rarely studied their opponents or adapted their fighting styles. They relied on the same techniques their species had used for generations. This gave her an idea about how humans might find success in this environment. The Academy's library contained detailed information about every species in the Alliance, including their anatomy, culture, and military traditions. Lisa spent hours learning about weak points and vulnerabilities that most beings never thought to protect. Because their natural advantages had always been enough, she began to understand that the galaxy's focus on individual combat prowess had created blind spots in their military thinking. They prepared for fights where strength met strength but had little experience with opponents who fought differently. Lisa's training sessions in the abandoned areas became more focused. She practiced techniques that used an opponent's size and strength against them. She learned to move in ways that confused creatures. Accustomed to facing enemies who fought like they did, the stage was being set for something that would change how the galaxy viewed humanity, though none of the alien cadets could imagine what was coming. 3 months into the training program, the tension between human and alien cadets reached a dangerous level. The constant mockery and dismissive treatment had created an atmosphere where conflict seemed inevitable. Lisa could feel it building, like pressure before a storm breaks. The combat exercise that day was different from usual training sessions. Commander Thex had designed a complex scenario that required mixed-species teams to work together in solving tactical problems. The exercise was meant to prepare cadets for real missions where different abilities would need to complement each other. Lisa found herself assigned to a team with Brutus and 3 other alien cadets. The Corvan warrior made his displeasure clear from the moment team assignments were announced. He looked at Lisa like she was a burden he had been forced to carry. "Why do we need the human?" he asked Commander Thex in front of everyone. "She will only slow us down and get in the way when real fighting starts." The exercise involved capturing a defended position using limited resources and avoiding civilian casualties. Teams were given incomplete information and had to adapt their plans as new intelligence became available. It was exactly the kind of complex problem that required creative thinking rather than brute force. Lisa studied the tactical display and quickly identified several approaches that could work. She noticed patterns in the defenders' behavior and weaknesses in their positioning that the other team members had missed. When she tried to share her observations, Brutus cut her off. "Humans do not understand warfare," he declared. "Your species has never fought a real battle against worthy opponents. Leave the planning to those who know how to fight." The team followed Brutus's straightforward assault plan, which relied on overwhelming the defenders with superior firepower and armor. Lisa tried several times to point out problems with the approach, but her teammates ignored her completely. They charged forward with confidence in their natural abilities. The exercise went badly from the start. The defenders had anticipated a direct assault and prepared countermeasures that neutralized the team's advantages. Brutus's plan resulted in heavy simulated casualties and failed to achieve any of the mission objectives after the exercise ended. Commander Thex gathered all the teams to discuss their performance. Most had failed, but a few teams led by more thoughtful alien officers had succeeded through careful planning and coordination. Lisa's team ranked near the bottom of all participants. "This failure demonstrates why mixed teams do not work," Brutus announced loudly. Humans lack the strength and courage needed for military operations. They should stick to support roles where they cannot interfere with real warriors. Lisa had endured months of insults and dismissive treatment, but something about this moment pushed her past her breaking point. The exercise had failed because her teammates refused to listen to good tactical advice, yet they were blaming her for their own mistakes. The plan failed because it was stupid, she said clearly. Any first-year cadet should have seen the problems with a direct assault against prepared defenders. The training hall fell silent. Alien cadets turned to stare at the small human who had dared to challenge a Corvan warrior in public. Even Commander Thex stopped his commentary to watch what would happen next. Brutus's bone spikes bristled with anger as he turned to face Lisa. His red skin darkened to a deeper shade that indicated extreme aggression in his species. The natural armor plates across his chest expanded slightly as his body prepared for combat. "You dare to question my tactics?" he growled. "Your pathetic species could not conquer a single world without help from others. What could you possibly know about warfare that I do not?" Lisa stood her ground despite being less than half his size. "I know that good tactics work regardless of who uses them. Human military history shows many examples of smaller forces defeating larger ones through better planning and execution." Several alien cadets laughed at the mention of human military history. To them, conflicts between humans seemed like children playing with toys compared to the massive wars their species had fought across the galaxy. Brutus stepped closer to Lisa, using his size to intimidate her. "Human military history is a joke. Your species fights with primitive weapons against equally weak opponents. You have never faced real warriors in battle." "Maybe not," Lisa replied calmly, "but we learned how to win anyway." The Corvan warriors. Patience finally snapped. In his culture, challenging a warrior's competence was an insult that demanded immediate response. He had been taught from childhood that strength was the ultimate arbiter of disputes. "You need to learn your place, human," Brutus snarled. "Perhaps a lesson in real strength will teach you some respect for your betters." Commander Thex made no move to intervene. In his view, this confrontation had been building for weeks and needed to be resolved. He believed that seeing human weakness demonstrated so clearly would finally convince them to accept their proper role in the academy. Other cadets formed a rough circle around Lisa and Brutus, sensing that something significant was about to happen. Some looked excited at the prospect of seeing the arrogant human put in her place. Others seemed uncomfortable but unwilling to interfere in what was clearly a challenge between warriors. Brutus raised his massive hand, intending to deliver what he considered a light backhand slap that would knock Lisa down without causing serious injury. In his mind, this was a measured response that would humiliate her without crossing the line into real violence. The blow connected with Lisa's face with a sound that echoed through the training hall. The force behind it was enormous, even though Brutus had held back most of his strength. Lisa's head snapped to the side and blood began flowing from her nose as she stumbled backward. Every alien cadet expected her to fall down and stay there, crying or begging for mercy. That was how challenges usually ended when there was such a massive difference in size and strength between opponents. The strong established dominance and the weak submitted, but Lisa did not fall. She took 2 steps back to regain her balance, wiped the blood from her nose with the back of her hand, and looked directly into Brutus's eyes. What he saw there made him pause for the first time in the encounter. There was no fear in Lisa's expression, no submission or pleading for mercy. Instead, her eyes held a cold calculation that seemed completely out of place on the face of someone who had just been struck by a creature 3 times her size. "Is that all?" she asked quietly. The training hall remained frozen in absolute silence as Lisa stood there with blood dripping from her nose. Brutus stared at her in confusion because her reaction made no sense according to everything he knew about combat and dominance. Smaller, weaker creatures were supposed to submit when faced with superior force. Lisa took a step forward instead of backing away. Her movement was controlled and deliberate, showing none of the panic or desperation that Brutus expected from someone who had just been struck by a Corvan warrior. She seemed to be thinking rather than reacting emotionally to the pain and humiliation. "You wanted to teach me about real strength," Lisa said calmly. "Let me show you what humans consider real strength." Brutus laughed and flexed his muscles, making his bone spikes extend further from his shoulders. His natural armor plates shifted to provide better protection for his vital areas. Every aspect of his biology was designed for combat against opponents who would try to match strength. "With strength, you cannot be serious," he said. "I was holding back before, but if you want a real fight, I will give you one. Just remember that you asked for this when you are lying broken on the floor." Lisa began moving in a slow circle around Brutus, forcing him to turn to keep her in sight. She studied his posture and movements, looking for the weaknesses she had learned about during her research. Corvan warriors were powerful, but they relied heavily on their natural advantages and centuries of fighting opponents who used similar tactics. Commander Thex watched with interest, but no concern for Lisa's safety. In his experience, mismatched fights like this ended quickly with the weaker opponent learning their proper place in the hierarchy. He saw this as an educational moment for all the human cadets. Other alien cadets began placing bets on how long Lisa would last before Brutus knocked her unconscious. The most optimistic estimates gave her less than 10 seconds once the fighting actually started. Most believed she would go down with the first real hit. Brutus grew impatient with Lisa's circling and decided to end the fight quickly. He charged forward with his arms spread wide, intending to grab her in a crushing bear hug that would demonstrate the futility of resisting Corvan's strength. His species had used this tactic successfully for thousands of years. Lisa waited until the last possible moment before moving. Instead of trying to dodge to either side where Brutus could easily catch her, she dropped low and rolled forward between his legs. Her small size, which had seemed like such a disadvantage, suddenly became an asset that allowed her to fit through spaces too small for larger opponents. Brutus stumbled as his charge met empty air where Lisa had been standing. His momentum carried him forward several steps before he could stop and turn around. By then, Lisa was already behind him and moving toward his left side where his bone spikes provided less protection. The Corvan warrior spun around faster than most creatures his size could move, but Lisa had anticipated this response. She had studied recordings of Corvan combat techniques and knew they preferred to use their bone spikes as weapons when opponents got too close. She stayed just outside the range of his natural weapons while remaining close enough to strike. Lisa's first attack targeted the joint where Brutus's left arm connected to his shoulder. Human anatomy courses had taught her that even heavily armored species had vulnerable points where different body parts came together. She struck with precision rather than power, hitting exactly where the armor plates created a small gap. Brutus roared in surprise, more than pain as his left arm suddenly felt weak and unresponsive. No opponent had ever targeted that specific spot before, and he did not understand how such a light blow could affect his arm's function. His species usually fought by trading heavy hits until one opponent could no longer continue. Lisa did not pause to celebrate the success of her first strike. She immediately moved to a new position, staying in motion to avoid giving Brutus a chance to grab her or land a solid hit. Her strategy was completely different from anything the alien cadets had seen before. Instead of trying to overpower her opponent, Lisa was systematically dismantling his ability to fight back. She attacked joints, pressure points, and vulnerable areas that most warriors never thought to protect. Each strike was calculated to reduce Brutus's effectiveness rather than cause maximum damage. The watching cadets began to realize that something unexpected was happening. This was not the quick domination they had anticipated. Lisa was not only surviving against a much larger opponent, she was actually winning the encounter through techniques none of them recognized. Brutus became increasingly frustrated as his natural advantages seemed to mean nothing against Lisa's tactics. His strength was useless if he could not grab her. His armor protected him from direct attacks but did nothing against strikes that targeted weak points he had never learned to defend. Commander Thex leaned forward with growing interest. He had seen thousands of combat encounters during his military career, but nothing quite like what Lisa was demonstrating. She was fighting in a way that seemed to ignore all the established rules of warfare. Lisa's next attack targeted Brutus's right knee, using a technique that applied force in a direction the joint was not designed to handle. The Corvan warrior stumbled and nearly fell as his leg buckled unexpectedly. His confident expression began to change into something approaching concern. "This is impossible," Brutus gasped. "Humans are weak. You cannot defeat me through strength." "I am not trying to defeat you through strength," Lisa replied while moving to attack his other leg. "I am defeating you through intelligence." The alien cadets watched in growing amazement as their strongest warrior began to show real signs of distress. Brutus was still standing and fighting, but his movements were becoming clumsy and uncoordinated. Several of his limbs were not responding properly to his commands. Lisa had been fighting for less than 2 minutes, but she had already neutralized most of Brutus's natural advantages. His bone spikes could not reach her if he could not move properly. His armor meant nothing if she could strike areas it did not protect. His superior strength was useless if his joints would not function correctly. Brutus made one final desperate attempt to end the fight. He lunged forward with both hands, trying to grab Lisa around the waist and crush her against his armored chest. It was a move that had worked against every opponent he had ever faced. Lisa caught his wrists as he reached for her, using his own momentum against him. She planted her feet and twisted her entire body, applying leverage in a way that used Brutus's size and weight as weapons against himself. The physics of the move turned his strength into a liability rather than an advantage. There was a sharp cracking sound as something in Brutus's jaw dislocated under the stress of the throw. He hit the training hall floor hard, his massive body making the metal deck plates ring like a bell. When the sound faded, Lisa was standing over him, holding his detached jawbone in her right hand. The training hall remained completely silent as Lisa stood holding Brutus's jawbone. The massive Corvan warrior lay on the floor, conscious but unable to speak or move properly. His natural armor had protected him from serious injury, but his pride and confidence were completely shattered. Every alien cadet stared at the scene, with expressions of shock and disbelief. What they had just witnessed should have been impossible according to everything they understood about combat and physical strength. A human had not merely survived against their strongest warrior, she had dominated him completely. Commander Thex slowly approached Lisa, his yellow eyes fixed on the jawbone in her hand. His entire understanding of human capabilities had been turned upside down in the space of a few minutes. He needed to reevaluate everything he thought he knew about warfare and strength. "How did you do that?" he asked quietly. "Corvan warriors have never been defeated in single combat by any species smaller than themselves. Their natural advantages should have made victory impossible for you." Lisa looked down at the jawbone, then back at the commander. "You have been thinking about strength all wrong. Brutus is stronger than me, but strength alone does not win fights. Intelligence, training, and adaptability matter more than size or natural weapons." She gestured toward the fallen Corvan warrior, who was trying unsuccessfully to reattach his jaw. "His species relies too heavily on their natural advantages. They have not learned to fight opponents who use different tactics, because they never needed to. That made him predictable." Commander Thex examined Brutus's injuries and found that while dramatic, they were not permanent. The jawbone would reattach naturally within a few days, and the joint damage would heal completely. Lisa had defeated him without causing lasting harm, which showed remarkable control and precision. "But you are so much smaller," another alien cadet said. "How can size and strength not matter in combat?" "Our military doctrine is based on the principle that superior physical capabilities determine victory." Lisa sat down on a nearby bench, still holding the jawbone like a trophy. Blood from her nose had dried on her face, but she seemed completely calm and focused. She looked like someone who had just completed a routine training exercise rather than accomplished something unprecedented. "Size and strength do matter," she explained, "but they are not the only factors that determine who wins a fight. Humans evolved on a planet where we were not the strongest predators. We survived by being smarter, more adaptable, and more persistent than our competitors. She pointed to various alien cadets around the room. Each of your species developed in environments where natural advantages were enough to ensure survival. You became strong, fast, or tough because those traits worked on your homeworlds, but Earth was different. Lisa continued her explanation while the other cadets listened with growing fascination. Humans had to compete against creatures that were stronger, faster, and better armed than we were. We could not rely on size or natural weapons, so we developed other advantages. We learned to use tools, work together, and solve problems that bigger creatures could not handle. Commander Thex was beginning to understand the implications of what he had witnessed. You are saying that humans developed fighting techniques specifically designed to defeat stronger opponents. That would explain how you were able to overcome Brutus's natural advantages. Exactly, Lisa confirmed. Human military history is full of examples where smaller forces defeated larger ones through better tactics, superior technology, or more effective strategies. We learned that intelligence and preparation can overcome almost any physical disadvantage. The alien cadets began asking questions about human warfare and combat techniques. They wanted to understand how tactics could be more important than strength. When everything in their military training emphasized physical capabilities above all else, Lisa described battles from Earth's history where outnumbered armies had achieved victory through clever positioning, psychological warfare, or technological innovations. She explained how humans had learned to turn their enemies' advantages into weaknesses through careful planning and execution. But surely physical strength still matters, protested a Drachner cadet. You cannot defeat an enemy if your weapons cannot harm them or if they are too fast for you to hit? Lisa nodded in agreement. Physical capabilities are important, but they are only tools. How you use those tools matters more than how powerful they are. A weak tool used correctly can be more effective than a strong tool used poorly. She stood up and demonstrated some of the techniques she had used against Brutus, showing how leverage and precision could multiply the effect of limited strength. The alien cadets watched with growing respect as they began to understand the sophisticated principles behind her seemingly simple movements. Commander Thex realized that the Academy's training program needed fundamental changes. We have been preparing our cadets to fight enemies who use the same tactics their species have always used. We never considered opponents who might fight in completely different ways. News of the incident spread rapidly throughout the Academy and beyond. Other instructors came to examine Brutus and question Lisa about her techniques. Medical staff confirmed that her victory had been achieved through skill rather than luck or accident within hours. Reports reached the Galactic Military Command headquarters. Senior officers who had dismissed human capabilities for decades suddenly found themselves reconsidering humanity's role in interstellar defense. If one human cadet could defeat their strongest warrior species, what did that mean for military planning? Emergency meetings were called to discuss the implications of Lisa's victory. Military strategists began reviewing human conflicts and tactical innovations that they had previously ignored. They discovered a wealth of knowledge about unconventional warfare and adaptive combat techniques. The Academy's database was updated to include detailed studies of human military history and combat philosophy. Courses on tactical flexibility and adaptive strategy were added to the curriculum. For the first time, alien cadets were required to learn from human instructors. Lisa found herself at the center of a transformation that would reshape galactic military doctrine. She had proven that humanity's greatest strength was not physical power, but the ability to find solutions that others could not imagine. The galaxy was finally beginning to understand what humans could contribute to interstellar peace and security. Brutus eventually recovered from his injuries, but his attitude toward humans changed completely. He requested permission to study human combat techniques and learn from Lisa's example. His defeat had taught him that there was more to warfare than he had ever realized. 3 weeks after the incident that changed everything, the Galactic Military Academy looked very different. New course schedules included mandatory classes on tactical adaptation and unconventional warfare. Human instructors had arrived from Earth to teach subjects that had never been considered important before. Lisa stood in the Academy's main briefing room, wearing the insignia of the Elite Vanguard program. She was the first human to be admitted to the prestigious unit that had previously been reserved for the galaxy's apex predator species. The same alien cadets who had mocked her now listened respectfully as she outlined their first real mission. Intelligence. Reports indicate that pirates have taken control of the mining station on Kepler-4. She began, pointing to a holographic display of the target location. The facility is heavily defended and the pirates have hostages. A direct assault would result in massive casualties on both sides. Brutus raised his hand to ask a question. The Corvan warrior had requested to serve under Lisa's command after recovering from their fight. His experience had taught him that strength without wisdom was worthless in modern warfare. "What approach do you recommend?" he asked. "The station's defenses are designed to repel conventional attacks. Our traditional tactics would be ineffective against prepared positions." Lisa smiled and activated a different view of the target. "We are not going to use traditional tactics. Human military doctrine emphasizes achieving objectives through minimal force and maximum intelligence. We will end this situation without firing a single shot." The mixed species team gathered around the display as Lisa explained her plan. Instead of attacking the pirates directly, they would infiltrate the station and turn the criminals' own security systems against them. Human technical specialists would disable the facility's weapons while the team rescued the hostages. This approach requires precise timing and coordination, Lisa continued. Each team member will have specific responsibilities that play to their species' natural advantages. But success depends on everyone working together rather than trying to overpower the enemy. A Hiver cadet named Swift asked about the risks involved in such a complex operation. "What happens if the pirates detect our infiltration before we complete the mission?" "They might harm the hostages if they realize they are being attacked." Lisa had anticipated this concern and prepared contingency plans for various scenarios. Human psychological analysis suggests that these pirates are primarily motivated by profit rather than ideology. If they believe escape is possible, they will focus on preserving their own lives rather than harming hostages. The team studied their assignments and practiced coordination exercises until every movement was perfectly synchronized. Lisa emphasized that success depended on each member understanding not just their own role, but how it connected to everyone else's responsibilities. Commander Thex observed the preparation sessions with growing amazement. The human approach to military operations was completely different from traditional galactic doctrine. Instead of relying on overwhelming force, Lisa's team used deception, misdirection, and psychological manipulation to achieve their goals. "Your methods seem unnecessarily complicated," the Draknar commander commented during one briefing. "Why not simply assault the station with superior firepower? Our weapons could destroy the pirate defenses within minutes." Lisa brought up casualty projections for a direct assault. A conventional attack would result in the deaths of at least 60% of the hostages and 30% of our own forces. My plan reduces those numbers to less than 5% for both groups. The numbers spoke for themselves, but Commander Thex still struggled to accept that complex tactics could be more effective than straightforward applications of military power. His species had conquered multiple star systems through aggressive warfare and overwhelming force. "Sometimes," Lisa explained patiently, "the best way to win a fight is to avoid fighting at all. Human military philosophy emphasizes achieving objectives rather than demonstrating strength. Dead enemies cannot surrender, and destroyed facilities cannot be rebuilt." The mission launched exactly on schedule, with Lisa's team approaching the mining station in a civilian transport ship. They appeared to be ordinary traders seeking to conduct business with the pirates, who had been selling stolen minerals on the black market. Swift used her species' natural speed to plant surveillance devices throughout the station while posing as a maintenance worker. Brutus created a distraction by pretending to negotiate a large purchase of rare metals. Meanwhile, human specialists infiltrated the station's computer networks and began taking control of critical systems. Lisa coordinated the operation from the transport ship, monitoring all team members and adjusting the plan as circumstances changed. Her ability to process multiple information streams simultaneously allowed her to maintain awareness of the entire situation. Within 2 hours, the team had complete control of the station's security systems, life support, and communications. The pirates found themselves trapped in their own stronghold with no way to call for help or escape to their ships. "Attention, pirates," Lisa announced over the station's intercom system. "Your weapons are disabled, your ships are locked down, and your communications are jammed. You have 2 choices: surrender peacefully or remain trapped until galactic patrol. Ships arrive." The pirate leader tried to threaten the hostages, but discovered that the doors to their holding area had been remotely locked. He could not reach them even if he wanted to carry out his threats. Meanwhile, station security robots under the team's control began rounding up pirates throughout the facility. The entire operation concluded without a single casualty on either side. The hostages were freed, the pirates were captured, and the mining station was returned to its rightful owners. What would have been a bloody siege under traditional tactics had become a bloodless victory through human innovation. News of the mission's success spread throughout the galactic military establishment. Senior officers who had been skeptical about human capabilities began requesting human advisors for their own operations. The Academy received orders to expand its human enrollment and create new programs based on Earth's military traditions. Lisa found herself promoted to instructor status while still completing her own training. She spent her days teaching alien cadets about tactical flexibility, psychological warfare, and adaptive strategy. Her former persecutors had become her most dedicated students. The Jawbone from her fight with Brutus was mounted on a ceremonial weapon that she carried as a symbol of her authority. It served as a reminder to the galaxy that humanity's greatest strength had never been physical power, but the intelligence to find solutions where others saw only problems. 6 months later, human-led teams were achieving impossible victories. Throughout the galaxy, conflicts that had seemed hopeless were resolved through clever negotiation and strategic thinking. The galaxy was finally learning that sometimes the most dangerous opponent was the one everyone had underestimated. Earth's status in the galactic community changed completely as other species recognized humanity's unique contributions to interstellar peace and security. The small, weak creatures that had once been dismissed as support personnel had become the galaxy's premier military, strategists, and peacekeepers. Lisa often thought about how everything had changed from that moment when Brutus struck her in the training hall. His attempt to demonstrate human weakness had instead revealed human strength, transforming not just her own life but the entire galaxy's understanding of what it meant to be truly powerful.